Unfortunately, it just takes a little bit of rain to cause a lot of problems on the roads, and we are proving that this evening. Light rain for most of the Bay Area, but it's having a significant impact on the evening commute. And we are tracking some heavier rain now making its way in off the Pacific into Marin County. Some pockets of heavier rain in the North Bay, but it's mostly light to moderate rainfall. There have been some pockets of heavier rain over San Francisco, but just a little bit of a dry break for the city right now, with that heavier rain crossing the bay over into Oakland, climbing over the Oakland Hills and into the Tri-Valley. All this rain is going to continue moving west to east. The back edge of it is in view. It's just going to take several hours for it to make its way across the Bay Area. The one piece of good news, the winds aren't quite as strong as they could have been. The strongest gusts right now are in the 15 to 20 mile an hour range, but that wind is still strong enough to move you around on the road just a little bit, especially considering the roads are wet. We'll take a look at that stronger storm system that's in the forecast for the weekend coming up in just a few minutes.
Chief Meteorologist Paul Hagen is tracking the conditions and the whipping winds.
Yeah, that's a problem. The winds themselves aren't that strong. It's the change in wind direction that produces some complications. This is the location of the fire. It's well to the north and northeast of Napa, burning uphill. Humidity in the area is low, around 20%. As you go up in elevation, it's even lower, around 12 to 15%. The winds along the valley floor out of the south, around 10 miles an hour, only gusting to 15 miles an hour. That's not that strong. The problem is that farther up in the atmosphere, once you get to flight level of those air support crews, and even along some of the ridge lines, the winds are offshore. They're out of the north, so we have conflicting wind directions, which makes it difficult for the air crews to pin down exactly where to do their drops until they get very close to ground level, and it provides a challenge for the fire crews as the fire may shift the direction that it's spreading as it gets into the higher elevations. This is the current view as we look out from the top of Mount Veeder. So we're looking to the east towards the fire. So that's south, this is north. The fire is growing in this direction. You can see how the smoke plume reaches straight up in the air there because it's being blown back to the south by those winds that change direction as you go higher up in the atmosphere. Now, part of the problem is that the fire fuels are so dry. The April rain that we had produced enough moisture to drop our fire fuel moisture levels down to about what's normal. That's the gray line here. The blue line is where we are so far this year. But since then, we've been so dry, record dry May, that now we're at record levels for fire fuel dryness. We measure it using a statistic called energy release component. You don't want to be near that red line, but it's exactly where we are. Now, the good news is there is a chance of rain on the way to the Bay Area. The bad news is it's not going to arrive for several more days. So still challenging conditions with the fire crews, still a couple hours of daylight left for them to utilize that air support and try to get as much containment as possible.
Tonight, air quality a big concern across the Bay Area as smoke from the Oak Fire near Yosemite drifts our way.
First Alert meteorologist Paul Hagen joining us now with an explanation on why we probably won't have to worry about a return to those infamous orange skies we recall so long ago.
That's what they were seeing in Yosemite today with the smoke plume from the Oak Fire. We do not want a return to that.
No.
The problem is that the winds are going to be shifting a little bit. The smoke plume is directed by the winds in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, about 1.5 miles, 2 miles up. That's where we have the wind arrows showing those wind direction. It's from the east and southeast, pushing that smoke plume towards the Bay Area. And that's going to be the case with those waves of smoke moving in our direction over the next couple of days at least, likely through the rest of this week. But to understand why it's not going to be that bad at ground level, well, we have to look at the perspective, kind of a cross-section of the atmosphere. That wind from the east and southeast is going to be trying to bring that smoke towards us, and we are going to see it in the skies overhead. Now, if the wind at ground level was from the same direction, the east and southeast, we would get that smoke at ground level where we have to breathe it, deteriorating our air quality. Even if the wind wasn't from that direction, if we just had calm winds, gravity would eventually pull some of that smoke down towards ground level. But neither of those things are going to be the case. Instead, while the winds farther up in the atmosphere from the east and southeast, we're going to have that onshore wind at ground level, and that means we're going to have a continuing flow of fresh air off the Pacific, the marine layer, really going to help us out, keeping that smoke elevated in the atmosphere. We're going to have to look at it, but we are not going to have to breathe it in. So air quality for the North Bay and the East Bay likely only dropping into the moderate category for the next several days. Otherwise, we're looking at a lot of green dots in the air quality forecast through the rest of this week. This is just the first large fire sending plumes of smoke towards us, though. So later this summer, we'll have to continue to watch the air quality situation, but things could be a lot worse this time around.
Let's bring in First Alert meteorologist Paul Hagen to kind of talk about what we're seeing and this danger right now.
Yeah, the vegetation dries out so quickly when you've had a few hot days, then leading up to an exceptionally hot day. So all the fire fuels are at near record dryness levels, and this is spreading in just tinder dry fuel. even though it's in a sparsely populated area for now, if it continues to spread, that's no longer guaranteed to be the case. Let's talk about the heat and exactly how hot it was. It was a day of record-shattering high temperatures across the Bay Area. All of the starred locations, just some of the records that were set today. 116 degrees in Livermore, made it up to 112 degrees in Santa Rosa, 104 in San Jose, and an even 100 degrees downtown Oakland. San Francisco didn't set a record, but still topped 90 degrees, making it up to 91. The exception, Pacifica, 65 degrees. So a 51-degree spread from the coast to inland parts of the Bay Area. And of course, climate change plays a role, because if you take the normal distribution of temperatures that we would ordinarily expect, without the influence of climate change, you would think that cold snaps and heat waves would basically kind of balance each other out. And we spend most of our time in the middle ground, close to average. But when the averages increase, thanks to the influence of climate change, even if it's by just 2.5 to 3 degrees, which is what we've seen across the Bay Area, pushing that entire distribution means that the heat waves become much more numerous than the cold snaps, and it brings in the fringe of that distribution, the extreme heat into play, which is what we saw today. And we see it in the data. The number of heat waves and cold snaps, the number of record lows and record highs used to be roughly in balance. That is no longer the case over the past several decades. The record highs far outnumber the number of record lows. And today was the second time in the past 3 years that we've had just record-crushing heat right over Labor Day weekend. We had this back in 2020, and most of tomorrow's record-high temperatures were set back in that heat wave just 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I find concerning. This is not just one day when we're in and out. This is a whole succession this week.
The heat's going to last most of the week. We'll take a look at that in the full forecast.
All right.
Strong winds whipped the flames into a whirling inferno called a firenado. Eventually, the fire was brought under control, but the strong winds continue creating yet another phenomenon, a towering smoke-nado that reached into the sky. We showed some of this video yesterday, but every time I look at it, it's still just frightening to watch.
It's amazing to see that happen.
Yeah, we see those with any kind of significantly developed fire, and it's just a consequence of the heat produced by the fire. We had one of these last year, either August or September. One of the fires that broke out in the Santa Cruz Mountains ended up producing a fire whirl. So I want to take a closer look at how that happens. It is because just the heat produced by those fires becomes so intense that the air rises up very quickly. So if we can take a look at the big board here, what's going to happen after that air starts to rise up? It creates a relative vacuum at ground level, so air has to rush in from all sides to replace it. You saw that from the overhead video. The air was rushing in from all sides of that fire whirl. It's the other name for these firenados, but it doesn't mean it's going to rush in necessarily in straight lines. It's going to converge at the base. It forces even more air to go up even more quickly, but depending on the terrain that air coming from the sides is following, depending on the wind direction that's surrounding the fire, it's going to twist those winds a little bit and get that circulation started. As the circulation gets stretched by the rising air, it's going to spin faster and faster. It's the same principle in terms of how thunderstorms produce actual tornadoes. One of those things that just adds to kind of the unpredictability of how these large fires work. We can actually ask kind of a broader question. Why don't we get thunderstorms more often in the Bay Area? Probably grew up learning in elementary school that it's because of the Pacific Ocean. We can expand on that a little bit. It's the cool air provided by the Pacific Ocean that limits our thunderstorm potential, because the air that rises to become thunderstorms, well, cool air doesn't want to rise. It's happy at ground level. Now, occasionally, a storm system will come in and force that air to go up. And if it rises enough, then the moisture condenses and forms rain, and we get light to moderate rainfall. But the air that's forced to rise isn't happy about it. As soon as the storm system moves out, the air sinks right back down to ground level, and we get rain out of the relatively flat clouds. They don't billow up farther into the atmosphere. The difference tomorrow is that we're going to have a different setup. As the heart of the storm system passes overhead and just to our north, we're going to have colder air in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So as the ground level air is lifted up, it's going to continue to rise spontaneously, and that allows it to develop into those taller clouds that actually become thunderstorms. You need taller clouds to separate the electricity that results in lightning and eventually thunder. It also helps to produce the hail that we're concerned about tomorrow out of the strongest cells.
Tempting, but Paul Hagen's been giving us the warnings here and up there.
They're going to get a lot of snow. It'll still be there. You'll have time. Just let the road crews do their thing once the snow winds down late Sunday into Monday. This is going to be rain for us tomorrow, first alert weather day, because that rain is going to arrive most heavily with the gustiest winds right around the morning rush hour. So we want the rain, we just don't not necessarily want it right at that time. Tonight, we're going to see some showers north of the Golden Gate for the first half of the night. Cloud cover continuing to thicken overhead. Then the rain is going to move in after midnight, with the most widespread and the heaviest rain falling around the morning commute on Thursday. And some lingering showers in the afternoon with chilly temperatures, just kind of a raw day overall. A dry break on Friday, but then more rain for the Bay Area over the weekend, and that's going to be more snow for the High Sierra. Let's focus on our rain, which is still up to our north, but you can start to see it edging a little bit closer to us. It's going to make more progress as we head through the rest of tonight. A couple of splash and dash showers, basically sprinkles, north of the Golden Gate possible this evening. I would not worry about that. The bulk of the rain is going to move in around and just after midnight and become much more widespread as we head through the very late night or very early morning hours, depending on your perspective. This narrow little band here contains the heaviest downpours and the strongest wind gusts, and it is going to sweep across the Bay Area during the morning commute. We're talking about wind gusts over 30 miles an hour, and the downpours are going to be falling at a rate that allows for some localized street flooding, maybe some ditches to overflow onto the sides of roads. You want to watch out for that. Plus, the roads are just going to be wet, and the wind is going to try to move you around on the roads. That heaviest rain pushes off to the east, but still lingering showers likely as we head into Thursday afternoon. That's going to be more off and on activity, but we're not going to completely dry out until we get into Thursday evening. That dry break continuing Friday before more rain adds up as we go into the weekend. Those wind gusts will be more noticeable over the next several hours. Some 15 to 25 mile an hour gusts out there by midnight. The strongest gusts, 20 to 30 miles an hour. That is strong enough to knock down some tree branches, some power lines, and certainly push higher profile vehicles around on the roads. And keep both hands on the wheel tomorrow morning, especially on the bridges. That wind is going to be even stronger there without any surrounding terrain to slow down the wind. The winds will move through and still be noticeable the rest of the day, but not nearly as strong, just making it feel a little bit cooler. So how much rain are we talking about? In general, half an inch to an inch of rain in most locations where that narrow band of heavier downpours decides to linger a little bit longer. And the latest forecast data indicates that would be the southern half of the Bay Area. So we have the better chance of picking up a little bit more than an inch of total rain, with the best opportunity for that the coastal ranges, especially in the Santa Cruz Mountains. In the High Sierra, this is going to be a snowmaker, 1 to 4 feet of snow, a winter storm warning in the red shaded areas. It's a winter weather advisory on the other side in Nevada. But from tonight all the way through Friday morning is when that warning is in effect. Not only a lot of snow, but also gusty winds, 55 to 65 miles an hour travel, strongly discouraged all the way through the weekend. While we're waiting on the rain, the weather's fine this evening, a little bit cool. Temperatures in the upper 40s and low 50s. Will drop down mostly to the 40s by early tomorrow morning, but we just won't warm up from there. High temperatures tomorrow only in the low 50s. That's a good 7 or 8 degrees below average. And with that cool air mass in place, once we lose the cloud cover late tomorrow, we're going to be in free fall with our temperatures dropping all the way down into the 20s inland by early on Friday morning. That dry break on Friday is replaced by more clouds and more showers Saturday and Sunday. The timing is still questionable with that. I think Saturday afternoon is going to bring in the first round of showers. It's not going to be as organized as this system that's moving in tonight and tomorrow. So just off and on showers through the weekend. Have an indoor alternative for any outdoor plans. And some of the showers are even going to linger into Monday. We definitely need every drop of rain. But again, the problem tomorrow is right when a lot of people are hitting the roads.
Yeah.
That's when the worst weather is going to be with us. So be patient, extra time. Take BART if you can.
Yeah.
Work from home if you can, because it's going to be sloppy.
I guess we'll stay indoors here in the studio tomorrow.
We have that option.